Hello, Lightworkers, and welcome to Megan's Mystical Mashup, a spiritual conversation between me and a guest about life, the universe, and anything in between. I'm your host, Megan Rounds, spiritual connector, empath, energist, healer, you name it. That's me. Welcome to today's show. Today's guest is the manager of the Lab Lightroom and hosts the weekly program Soul Whispers every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time here in the main lab. She's been a member of the Lightworkers Lab for about 2 years now, and her main modalities are clairvoyance, clairaudience, and claircognizance. She's a professional hairstylist and nail technician, renting her own space and working for herself. She is also building her intuitive business, Amanda Rae Golden Heart Healing, and she offers a 10% discount for her services with the code LABFAM10. In addition to all of that, she's married with 2 boys, Ben and Zach, and is also mom to dogs Samson and parakeets Luna and Lloyd. They all live near Cleveland, Ohio. Please give a warm Lightworkers welcome to Amanda Rae Hill. Hey, Amanda.
Hi.
Yay! It's so great to have you here today with us. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. I wanted to just start out with a really big request, and that is to share with us your spiritual journey. And then throughout that time, I may interject with a couple of questions for follow-up and things like that. But at some point, I'll also ask that you share with us how you found the Lightworkers Lab, if you can share that as a part of your journey.
Sure. Okay.
Awesome.
Cool. I'm excited. Well, I do want to tell you, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me on the show. It is super nice to get to share my story and also to talk to other people who've been kind of down the same path, and they're all different. So that's the cool part. And I love people and I love hearing their stories. So I like that you do this kind of show. So I think that's really cool.
Thank you.
I do want to share a quick story about something that I found was it's magical, because I have had premonition dreams ever since I was younger. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I started journaling them. And I had a dream. It was back, I think it was like January, February this year. And I kept dreaming that this one dream in particular, but I had had several dreams that the place that I worked was going to be sold and it was going to be under a new owner. And I thought, well, that is just crazy. But I had several dreams of this nature. And in the last dream that I had the dream that she sold the salon and that it was, we were all still very good friends and supported each other, which is not always the case in this kind of industry. And at the end of the dream, it was that I was contacted by a person who does interviews, and because I read the dream this morning to refresh my memory, and it was because they liked my energy and knew I was a medium. And I thought, well, that's weird. And as I'm writing this down, like half asleep in bed, I'm like, so she's going to sell the salon and I'm going to be interviewed. Oh, okay. Too much chips and salsa, and put my phone on my nightstand and went about my day. And so when the salon actually ended up being sold, which actually just took place August 1st, which was last Saturday. So when I got the news that she was selling, it was the same week when you reached out. I was on vacation and you were like, hey, I have this show and, can you come on? And I was like, get out. What? So I just thought that was really cool. And to me, it was a good reminder of like, there's so much more to this life, and that, the spiritual journey and our walk here on earth is so interwoven that we sometimes feel like we need to put it in 2 buckets or separate it, or that one's good and one's not good, or something like that. So I don't know. I just wanted to share that little story because it surprised myself, if I'm honest. Like, I'm always surprised on how spirit works, because I had no idea. I thought that both things were absolutely ridiculous and neither one of them would even happen. And both of them happened, and it was in the same dream, and it actually happened in the same week. So
I am so glad you shared that story. You mentioned it yesterday, but the one thing you didn't mention was that it said something around liking your energy. And I remember specifically saying that when I reached out to you. And
Yes.
I'm like, really, I love that. And I think I
Yeah.
also told you that, certainly all of the things that, in that amount of time that you were like, okay, and then it actually happened in the same week is super cool. But also, it's helpful for me or anybody, who interacts with your dream in that sense, and that then comes true to know that, I think I told you before, for me, it feels like I was called into service, that I got to be a bit of an earth angel, as I like to call them. And, it's like, I love when that happens and to know that I was able to play a part in that. So thank you again for sharing, but also, you know, super cool that we had that kind of connection and didn't actually know it at the time, right?
Yeah. No idea. No idea. So my spiritual journey, as I was young, I would dream about all kinds of things, and I would realize, and I didn't write them down or anything like that, but I would realize as things would come into play, I would be like, well, I had a dream about that, or I knew about that, and I thought, well, it was something that was always interesting to me. And I would share it with my family or my friends. And I was known as that girl who had like this wild imagination. And I was always talking about my things that I saw or things that I heard or things that I felt. And my mom was very supportive, but she was like, honey, that's your imagination. And then I'm sure that sometimes it was like, it's only your imagination. So it was, my family was like, okay, okay, sure. So I would share some things, and a lot of it I kept to myself because sometimes the reaction that I got, whether it was from friends or family or my church, um, my Sunday school teacher or my classmates in Sunday school, it wouldn't feel like they were accepting of whatever I was saying, or they had no idea what I was talking about. So I didn't always feel comfortable sharing. So I kept a lot of it inside. Um, but I was very clairaudient, and I would sleep with the radio on so I didn't hear things. I would, I kept a lot. I prayed a lot that I was safe because I didn't feel like that was something that, I was supposed to be doing, but I could never figure out why it wouldn't go away because I would
Yeah.
pray it away all the time. And so it would come like the things would happen, and then things would settle down and happen and settle down. That would happen all throughout my high school, even college years. Lots of things would happen, and it became a joke like, oh, well, you're in Amanda's dorm room, of course, or, things like that. And so I learned to kind of, I guess, put up a little bit of a wall at those little tiny like comments people would say because I didn't want to believe that about myself, but I also knew that I wasn't trying to bring those things on or making them up. And I just wasn't
Sure.
sure how to deal with that, I guess. So, and those things happened throughout I ended up getting married. My husband had experienced things with me, and he was kind of like, okay, and I know he believed me because he's experienced things, but he was just like, I don't want to like, I can't explain it. I don't want to know type deal. And I understand that too. So when I had kids, um, my oldest was about 4, and he started sharing his experiences with me and telling me things. And then my youngest came along, and we had an incident in a store where he had saw something as well, and I knew right away just because of how they would communicate with me what it was that they were seeing. They could see, they were clairvoyant like I am, and they're both clairaudient. And I knew at that moment I needed to find answers, and I could no longer stick my head in the sand and pretend that it wasn't happening. I needed to face that. But it took me having kids to face that, to get that like mama bear kind of feel
Yeah.
to it, that it was like, oh, you're not going to go. No, my kids are not going to do this. So I started reading, and of course, Google.
Thank goodness
and
for good
and
Google.
looking things up. Right. And then Facebook, I found a few groups that I would like or follow, and some of them just didn't feel, I, I never felt 100% comfortable in them. And I stumbled upon the Lightworkers Lab and I asked to join. And this is also very much out of my comfort zone because I was a very private person. My life
Mm.
was private. I didn't like to, on social media, everything, like sit here and talk to somebody about my life. Never would have done that years ago. And so I joined this group and I thought, wow, this is a huge group. And I was excited and pulled to it, but I also was like, what did I get myself into? Because it was right before the Bliss retreat. So they're all talking about
Oh,
going and
yeah.
meeting. And I was like, whoa, I don't know about all this. And so I would just tune in to the teachers who were teaching. I would use that library like crazy. I would go up and watch all those videos in the lab, and I started showing, tuning into some of the lives and watching and listening to people's stories and listening and having all of those broadcasters share their stories and their personal encounters and their personal, like how I deal with this or how I deal with that. Like Nicole was one of them who really helped me because she had a way of not compartmentalizing and bringing both her religious upbringing and her things that she connected to, like her roots, in with the spirituality part of it. And I thought that was the most beautiful thing. And so I thought, well, that's possible, because I thought they had to be separate. So um, that helped me open up a little bit more. So I was able to mesh them and then get comfortable and to start learning. So that's when I started taking some classes and um, getting brave and saying yes and showing up and giving things a shot and trying to unlearn a bunch.
Yeah.
So
Unlearning's a huge piece of that. I do want to just mention you had talked about Nicole. I assume you mean Nicole Powers, who's been on this
yeah,
show a couple of times now. So, for those of you who
yes,
aren't familiar with Nicole, I highly encourage you to look her up. She has some awesome perspectives, and oh yeah, the mashups we've had have been profound.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely go
She's
back and
amazing.
search for her. She is.
I've
She's
taken a class of hers as well.
oh good.
It was Dancing with the Divine, and it was amazing. It was, it made me look at some stuff that I didn't even realize that I needed to look at. And it helped. It helped. Without That's a whole nother, I could talk about that all day too. So, but yeah, it was amazing. So
Well, thank you for sharing. Of course, I have questions, and
sure.
but one thing that really stood out to me was your experiences in the lab and how you talked about, it was a large lab when you joined, and that can be really intimidating. And you kind of talked about how I mean, you didn't call yourself a lurker, but I almost think that it's an important part of becoming uh, integrated into the lab is to observe a lot first and see how it works and get used to how people interact, but also how they share and start. It's one of the first ways to recognize how other people's experiences, can relate to our own, so that we're not isolated and alone. Like you had mentioned so many times, people were telling you it's your imagination, you felt different, and all of these things that to me, it seems like a really positive way to get involved in the lab is just to start out by watching and looking and observing and see who resonates and joining their lives when you can, and getting interactive that way in a smaller way, during those
Yeah.
lives, having a comment there and seeing that, wow, people are happy and positive and supportive.
Yes.
And
Yes. I really like to, and I would comment here and there, and I eventually came at like a little bit more commenting here and there and here and there. And then I started to notice names in the feed of
mm-hmm.
like different people, and they would share different things. And I was like, I'm in a group with a lot of normal people. There's normal, everyday people here. This is really cool, and they were so supportive and so caring and compassionate. And um it was very it was very it really fed my soul from a place that I didn't realize, because I knew I was safe with all these experiences because I never had anything bad or scary or anything like that happen. but I really wasn't sure if I was allowed to pursue that path, and or what would happen, or all the questions. I had all the questions and then more so. And it was interesting because as I would struggle with something in my personal life, or have a something I'm trying to work through or think about, I would tune in, and those things that the broadcaster, or even the people in the comments would be talking, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, they're going through that too, like it's not just me. Wait, what? So that was very huge. I mean, that's the only, it was just key in
Yeah.
so much of my opening up and my journey and my development. So I really owe a lot of gratitude and thanks to the lab, really, for and all the instructors, because just them getting up, and they have no idea how much just sharing just a smidget of their day, like a little clip of a day or an afternoon or a moment of their life, could really touch someone who's like tuning in to listen, and that
Yeah.
is important. So that was what I needed.
Well, and I also, I suspect you didn't specifically say it, but when you had your questions and you'd go into the lab, I mean, you're likely already tapping into some of that energy if you're seeing them talk about the same things, which always happens to me. If I have a question, it's like, I just need to, I mean, just ask the question and then it comes. The answers come as long as we're open to receiving them. And a great
Yeah.
place to do that for, for metaphysical and spiritual things is a lab, because that's all it's about, right?
Right.
And it seems like we're always drawn to the things that are important for us to hear. So I love that intersection. Yeah, very cool. So I was also curious, a couple of questions came to mind. One is, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share any specific examples, if you can recall them, throughout your journey, where, like you talked about being clairvoyant, and how does that show up for you, or how has it? Same with clairaudience. If you don't want to share exact, I mean, you don't leave out the details, but I'm just kind of curious how it's shown up to you, and when did you at some point just even realize that this, I mean, wow, I'm seeing things that other people aren't.
Well, uh, um, a few years ago, it was really once I became an adult is when and I had my kids and they had questions, and I was really into that. Like, I'm going to figure it out so that when they do come to me in a few years or after multiple experiences, I have answers for them. So I really started to dig in. I learned about meditation. And so I like, okay, well, my mind's all day long. So I started with the guided, and that helped, and the breathing techniques. And eventually I got to the point where I could just turn on some, nice soothing music and sit down and meditate. Well, one particular time I had my grandfather, who I did not meet in person. It was my mom's father. He'd passed away when she was really young, and I never got a chance to meet him. And he came to me in meditation and had said, um, how much that when our loved ones are here and they pass, that's not it. It's not like a done deal. They aren't up there in a different room with the door closed having a party waiting for us to come up. It's they can see us, they are rooting for us. They can love on us from that side. They can help us. They can get our attention with, you know, like you would a baby, rattle, look over here, look over here. They can help guide us like that in working with, the divine and everything. So one thing that he had told me was he's been supporting all of us from where he is. And he had told me, I sent you my younger brother for when you were younger, to help entertain you and play with you. So when I was very young, my mom and my biological dad got divorced before I was born. And my mom remarried a fabulous man, and they later had another little boy. And then I have two stepsisters as well, but we're all like family because I was two. But to get back on the topic, I had a bedroom up at the top of the house. We had a little tiny, like, house with just the top was one room. It was like the attic, but they had redone it. It was my bedroom. And I would be up there and I would suddenly this little boy would come into my room and it was time for tea, like time for tea. So I would grab my teapot and race down the stairs and I'd be like, put some water, mom, we got to do this. You know, he's here. We have to have tea. We have to tea. Give me some water, 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 water. And she'd be like, Amanda, you know, and so in her mind, she's thinking, child, I'm taking care of whatever adult, you know, tasks that she's doing. And I wanted water right now. And it was like, you know, and so she would get the water and I would go back up there. And I remember having tea with this boy because I had someone to talk to. And he would make me laugh and we would sit and he would have tea with me. He never really actually drank the tea, water, tea, whatever. I never, you know, but I didn't care. And so, and that happened a few times. And so through that meditation, what my grandfather had told me was he sent his little brother Stephen to have tea with me and to be my playmate during some tough times. And so I came out of that meditation. I was like, I don't remember him having a brother. That didn't like, but I had also at the same time been working on ancestry. So I went downstairs and I got on the computer and I, you know, got on and was looking. And lo and behold, he had had a little brother who had passed away when he was younger. He was actually, I believe, if I remember correctly, he was older than my grandfather, but he died when he was 6. And
Wow.
he had, I think it was tetanus. That was the jaw locks, like lockjaw, tetanus, all that. So he had stepped on something and ended up very sick and passed away. And so I called my mom and I was like, Mom, the little boy named Stephen was Stephen. That was his name. He
Holy
was
cow.
Grandpa's younger or older brother who passed away. And she was like, what? My poor mom. I love her. She does such a good job. But she's always listened. And I've always, you know, she's always
That's
listened,
helpful.
tried to be supportive. But as an adult, you know, I've been there as a mom, like your kids, you're like, okay, enough of this is, you know. So, but that was
Wow.
one thing, that was one experience of being clairvoyant, clairaudient, and you know, being able to connect in with meditation and being able to get answers from that, which blew
Yeah.
my mind.
Big full circle validation there. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And the healing message of, you know, that when they do pass, they are here. They are
Yeah.
with us. They are not gone forever.
Yeah.
So that's proof that your soul lives on, you know, once our bodies are done. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
curious when you went to college and, there was a little bit about, yeah, you're Amanda's roommate, of course they're going to have strange
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah.
Did people begin to seek you out? Even if they never talked to you about these experiences you've had, did you find that people started to seek you out either for advice or for insights?
Always, always. I always was a good listener. And, you know, I was, even when I was young, you know, they would be like, well, she's older than she is, you know, she acts like a little adult. And that happened even through college. Like I had lots of people who would just tell me. I went to college for art education. And so I would be sitting there, you know, just painting or doing whatever. And the person next to me would just be telling me everything. And I would be like,
Thank you.
I want to say, be
You know?
like, right, exactly. Like, she don't want to be like, I'm sorry, I don't know what to say. And I'm saying I'm sorry never felt right. Like, I never really could feel the right words to tell them. I just would let them tell me. And
Sometimes that's all they need is a person to talk to. But it's interesting. I find that the same is true of me, my mom. My gosh. Well, and I picked this up from her too, I suppose, in many ways. But like, go to the store, wait in line. Even now with social distancing, somebody will just start telling me everything about their life. And I'm okay with that. But my husband is like, what is going on? Why do people tell you these things? They never tell him. You know,
I could write a book about the most bizarre things people have told me, random, whether it's the cashier, the bank teller, um, in my job. Like I'm always
gosh,
like,
I bet in
I
your
won't tell secrets. So I won't even tell you examples because I don't want anybody to feel like I'm outing them. But I mean, some of the things that people tell, and you know what? I don't even judge that because they ended up, like, if it might be at work, they ended up in my chair for a reason. You know, I came through their line at the bank or cashier or cash register for a reason. And if that's my service on that that day, then I'm doing what I was put here to do. I just have to make sure that I'm actually taking care of myself. I would
Mm.
explain it to my husband, like at work. I love my clients. They will come in and they will tell me things. We have a two-way conversation the whole time. I know I can't remember to take my packed lunch off the counter, but I can remember their cousin's sister-in-law's name. Like, it's the most
Hello, I know.
ridiculous. If I could just train my brain to remember the correct things and leave out the rest, but I don't. What that's just that's how God made me, so it is what it is. But I would I told my husband, I said, when I go to work and someone comes in and they tell me, they could be my client for 5, 10 years, and I'm involved. I care. I want to know. And they tell me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my heart hurts, for you. And we discuss it and they leave. And it's like, I always explained it as like, I don't know why, but a fishing vest. I'll put their vest on and they feel better and they leave. And then the next person comes in and they sit down. And, as I'm providing them a service, I'm also grabbing their vest unknowingly between the two of us that, well, I used to not know, but now I do. But I would put that vest on and then they would leave. And then the next person and so on and so forth. So I would come home with all of these vests filled pockets with different tackle of whatever they're tackling. And I was just exhausted and my body started to really take that toll. And that's when I decided, the one night we were getting ready for bed, and I just started crying and I said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I don't want my kids to remember me this way. I don't want to be this kind of friend, wife, daughter, sister, cousin, whatever, coworker. And I started really paying attention to what I was eating. And that's when I found that I had celiac and a whole slew of food allergies. And once I cleaned up my body's system, that's when my spiritual gifts really came online. And then I had a whole other thing to figure out. And so it was kind of, I feel like that was spirit's way of like cleaning my um I don't know, my machine, my body, in order to be able to do this kind of work.
That is such a powerful story, but also the metaphor. I love, love, love how you described it with the fishing vests and the tackle, and how, without being aware, you were putting all of these things on and how that would weigh you down. It really strikes a chord with me. I can completely resonate with that. In different context, I don't have the same work, but I've had a lot of public work in the past, especially, and how that has kind of awakened you to the nutritional aspect of things. Something that I personally have been very stubborn with. I haven't been that great with hearing those messages, and I'm curious if you can talk a bit about how did you. I mean, you found out you had these allergies and that it was really important to clean up nutritionally. How did you stick with it? Is that just something that just naturally fell into place for you, or how did you incorporate any of your spiritual beliefs into that too, if at all?
Well, it's kind of, there's a couple different streams that feed into that. So I also struggle really a lot with endometriosis. After my first child, I had an emergency hysterectomy and a near death experience as well. And so after dealing with that, I ended up having endometriosis growing in my abdominal wall. And I had several surgeries with that. Well, I got sick and tired of having surgeries. So I went and I was going to my chiropractor for my scoliosis, which is a whole nother thing. But she had someone who would come in, and she worked with essential oils, and she really recommended her. So I said, well, all right, I'll try it. And I went in, and this lady put all kinds of smelly, stinky oils all over my abdominal space. And it was crazy because she just put her hands like over me, and I can't even remember what she called her. It wasn't a Reiki practitioner, it wasn't energy healer, it was something different, but she was able to get her in her office. But anyway, I remember going to work and being like, to the girls, being like, do I smell? Like, can you smell me? Can you, if I'm moving around, are my clients going to be gagging? And they're like, I mean, a little. I love them. So they were probably like, yeah, no. But but they were really potent, I thought. But I worked that day and I felt great. And so I knew there was something different there. So I started using essential oils. And I knew that when you make that small life shift, you get results. So then when I figured out that I had celiac and it was gluten, I was desperate. I was so desperate to feel better that I jumped right in. And the few times that I slipped up, or the few times where I was like, man, that cookie looks way too good to be sitting there, I'm going to eat it. What's one cookie? What's like one cookie this big? One cookie this big will cost me probably 5 to 7 days.
Wow. Okay.
So that's a really big deterrent because it's not just usually that first day of even cross contamination, I'm okay. Like I had an incident last night, so my eyes feel a little bit puffy today. But it's not just like a one and done thing. It's several days of different, like the first day my eyes will be puffy and I'll feel kind of like yucky. The second day I'll get like this massive headache and body aches. The third day it starts to really set into my digestive system, my headaches, my inflammation around my entire body, my joints, things like that. Like then I like a couple days of feeling like you got hit by a Mack truck, and then you start to go on the upswing. So that's a pretty good way to make me like that cookie is not so yummy looking.
Well,
So
it's impressive how attuned you are to those different, I'll call them symptoms, but experiences in that progression. Because as hearing you talk about it, it's like, huh, I haven't noticed to that level, but hearing some of the things that you brought forth are like, well, I have that, yeah. And yet I'm just like, but that cookie, you know,
yeah,
it's like,
yeah, yes,
let's make
exactly.
more,
But yes, it's taught me. Well, it's funny because now as I hear you say that, I've been thinking to myself, I'm so sensitive to energies these days, and it's really amped up so much recently. And so when you're telling my story back to me, I'm thinking, well, then why are you so surprised that you're feeling this now, or you're feeling this now, or you're feeling this? So thank you for helping me realize this is why I love talking and conversing with other people who share the same common things in their life, because it helps me understand myself more as it would help the person I'm talking to understand more. That's why I feel like we need to have our, if you want to call it your tribe, you need to have your soul family, your people that you
yes.
talk to, because it enriches and it teaches you through conversation, just everyday conversation. It teaches you about yourself
It does more
like
and
it just
more
did
and
me.
more. It's like I'll talk to some of my friends, offer them insights based on things going on in their lives, and I'm talking and I'm like, okay, this is a message for me too. And I know they'll throw it at me if I don't say it, because they'll be,
Oh yeah.
Megan, did you hear
Oh
what you
yeah.
said? But yeah, I think it's very important to talk, even just within a small circle. It, doesn't always have to be in a public forum like this,
Right.
although it can be helpful. Actually, I think a lot of times people say that they say things on this show that really offered them insights for themselves in ways that they don't get when they just think about it or write it out. And so
Yes.
happy to provide that service.
Yeah.
I
Thank
love
you.
to be called into service, and I love how you had mentioned that too, about all of the different places, in small ways when we aren't aware. Just like your story, if you hadn't have shared that story about your dream, I wouldn't have known that the role I played without
Yeah.
knowing I was playing a role. And that's okay. But I think it's so important to remember that we don't typically know how we affect other people's lives unless they are some of the few to tell us, or we've been fortunate enough to see, in our own way, our own influence. And so I'm so thankful that you've shared that, because it's a really important message, especially if I know I sometimes feel like, well, am I making a difference, in the world?
Oh
Do I
yeah.
have an impact? And I assume a lot of people have those moments. And it's like, well, we may not know what they are, but, they're still there. So thank you. We have 7 minutes remaining,
Oh my goodness gracious.
and I told you it would likely fly. And
Yeah.
so
Oh
I'm
my goodness.
curious. I have questions, but in the event that you have other things that you wanted to make sure you said before we say goodbye for today, I wanted to give you some, a chance to do that.
I guess let's see, if I had to share anything else, I would say how important it is and how I've learned this recently, and I'm going to continue to relearn every time life takes you back around that giant spiral. How important it is to be your own authentic self, no matter what's going on. Because there's been so many times where I've held my tongue or didn't really come out and say what my intuition was telling me, or what, I was being encouraged to say or do from spirit, and how many opportunities I have missed to be a witness to someone, to help them. And like, that's where I have that people are like, oh, so you're an energy healer. Well, yes, but being a healer, I don't do it. I'm not responsible for anything. I am only helping facilitate your healing. So, and what I was realizing was, by not really, because I just recently came out and told my friends and family and my coworkers and my clients what I've been up to for the last few years. And I was afraid of the response that I would get, because it'd be so much like the feelings that I would feel when I was younger, of feeling like, oh, they reject me, or I'm not allowed to do this, or this is bad, or whatever. And so, by coming out and sharing my story, I've had almost, now I'm like, and I know I have to let that part go, but now I'm like, why did I wait so long? Because I've had so many people reach out to me, or text me, call me, message me, people that I've known for years, that have like, I have this too. Oh my gosh, like, I didn't know. And then I've got the ones who are like, well, congratulations, you finally know. And I'm like, because they were like, you're not going to say anything, but I knew. So it's very encouraging. So by healing and doing the work myself, I'm also able to help other people. And so that's the hard part about walking this kind of spiritual path for all of us. And even what, it doesn't matter if you're at the beginning, the middle, or the end, that whole time you're doing the work, but by doing that work, it's that ripple effect.
Yeah.
So even when it doesn't feel big, it's big.
Yeah.
So
Oh, nicely said. I love the way you word things. I think that piece about why did I wait so long is so important to, like you had said, it's easy to want to beat up on ourselves about the timing. And I am a clear example of that, because a lot of the things that I've really done spiritually in my life hasn't been, has been after my 40s, and especially in my 50s. And I'm like, oh, come on, why couldn't I have done this in my 20s? I'd be so much farther ahead. But the thing is, it's my path. It's my life path. And all of my experiences have been important in preparing me for where I'm at today. And I try to remind myself of that in those moments where I am like, come on, couldn't you have figured this out sooner? I sometimes
oh
get
yeah.
into the thickness realm where it's like I was so thick I didn't even know, it's like, how could I not have known this before? But, it is what it is. And I think that remembering also, when you had talked about the people who came forth and said, I'm that too, they may not have been able to hear that message if it had come earlier. Because I think I mentioned to you in our preparation for today, that I had an experience. I just lost my train of thought around. I just totally lost it. It'll come back. But just the thing about having things. I've heard messages multiple times before I actually really heard them. They just bounced off and went somewhere else because I wasn't ready to hear them. And so, timing is everything, and we are not the people who can decide what the right timing is. And,
Yes. Ooh,
just
that's good. Yes.
it's a big piece of all of our paths and journeys, I think, has to do with the timing, and a lot of it we just don't know about. But now is the
Yeah.
right time, so good. And congratulations on sharing
Thank
that.
you.
I know it takes a lot of courage, and And if we had more time, I would ask you what you did to prepare to do that, how, like your mental process around it. So maybe we'll talk about that another time because I'm fascinated by that piece where we're now ready to, move into change, kind of adjust our own identity in a sense to be comfortable coming forward saying, this is me. And that authenticism, is that the right word? Is that any authenticism? Is
I
that a word? I don't
I
know.
think so. I
Something to
know
do
it
with
is. I mean,
authentic.
yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. So, today it is. It is a word no matter
Excellent.
what. I think it
Yes.
is, though.
Well, I make up words all the time, so half the time I'm like, is that a real word? I don't know. It's my word,
So do
It's
I.
mechanisms.
I make up, yes, I make up words all the time. I love it.
But I think
I
that,
love it.
just to finish, the thing about being authentic is really important. And a lot of being authentic has to do with trust and trusting ourselves. And that in and of itself is a big process. It doesn't automatically come. It's just hopefully something to recognize as part of the path and progression. So, Amanda, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure talking with you
Thank
today.
you for having me.
And oh,
Thank you for having me.
as always, a real pleasure. Have a magical, mystical rest of your weekend and beyond. Bye bye, everyone.